Why did Slovenes lose Trieste, Gorizia? Answer: Great Britain and the United States did not want Trieste to belong to Yugoslavia, because they were scaring that the Soviet Union could get a direct exit to the Adriatic Sea and anchor its battle boats and submarines in the port. 70 years since the accession of Primorska and the creation of the WTO Danijlos Managic, the 29th of June 2017. This year we mark 70 years since the accession of Primorska to Slovenia, and this anniversary also coincides with the date of the creation of the Free Trieste Territory, STO, otherwise a formerly independent state, which operated from 1947 to 1954 under the control of the United Nations. Before the start of the First World War, the whole area of the Primorska region, including Trieste, was part of the Austro-Hungarian monarchy. Although Italy was a member of the Central Powers, in formal alliance with Germany and Austria-Hungary, at the outbreak of war in 1914, Rome decided to declare neutrality and did not announce a war to the Andanon member states. In April 1915, representatives of the Angolan forces signed a secret agreement with Italy, pledging Rome a number of territories, mostly settled by Slovenes and Croats, of Austria-Hungary if Italy announced war on the Central Forces. Italy did only a month later. After the end of the war, the defeat of the Central Powers and the disintegration of Austria-Hungary, Italy received the Treaty of Rapallo, 1920, about a third of the territory of today's Slovenia, Istria and many islands in the Adriatic Sea, and a few years later, Rijeka. Despite the fact that the majority of the population spoke Croatian, Slovenian, German or Friulian, especially after the arrival of Mussolini to power, 1922, strong Italianization began in the region. That's why many people from the region emigrated to the Kingdom of SHS and Austria. The special place of Trieste in the balance between the West and the East. The territory near the Gulf of Trieste is also in the time of the World War was considered problematic in the relations between the Allies in the West and the East. Great Britain and the United States did not want Trieste to belong to Yugoslavia, as they were scaring that the Soviet Union could get a direct exit to the Adriatic Sea and anchored its battle boats and submarines in the port. In the last 2 years of war, the Allies have strongly bombarded Trieste and virtually completely destroyed the Trieste port. After they were at the meeting of Avnoj-Jadc, the Yugoslav leaders adopted a decision on joining T.I. the Slovenian littoral, Istria and Trieste to Yugoslavia. Churchill announced that the Allies would occupy the entire territory dominated by Italy before the war. At that time, the battle began. Who will first step into Trieste? The Yugoslav army liberated Trieste. On the 28th of April 1945, the Yugoslav army and left political groups in Trieste, Slovene, Croatian and Italian anti-fascists, launched an attack on German, Ustasha and Homeland units in the city, and released it on May 3. Despite the fact that the Yugoslav army came to the city in front of the British and New Zealand troops, the Western Allies asked Tito to withdraw his troops from Trieste. In the spirit of the politics of interest spheres, I also demanded that the Soviet Union be joined in spite of the favorable attitude towards Yugoslavia. Already in May, they pressed Tito to soften the demands for the city administration, and the Yugoslav army withdrew from the western bank of the Soka River on the 16th of May. A few days later, Yugoslavia agreed to establish the alliance military administration in the crisis area. Tito must give it up. After weeks of crisis and threatening military confrontation, a June agreement was signed on June 9, 1945, by which the Yugoslav army withdrew west of the Morgan Line, a dividing line set by U.S. Commander Morgan after the arrival of Western Allies in Trieste. With this agreement, the Yugoslav army nevertheless retained a military contingent within the framework of the Allied military administration. This agreement concluded the first period of the Trieste crisis, in which there was a great possibility of military confrontation. Some historians call this crisis the first hotspot of the Cold War between the West and the East. Diplomacy takes the lead. Soon, June 20, 1945, a Devon agreement between the Allies and Yugoslavia was followed. This agreement has been implemented by the term Venezia Giulia. In autumn, negotiations on the fate of Trieste began in London. The great powers failed to reach any concrete agreement. The Western powers only agreed that Yugoslavia should not have a city. In fact, the limit was in the hands of four major powers: France, the Soviet Union, the United States and the United Kingdom. These four countries have also established a commission to establish a border on an ethnic basis. In April 1946 the commission completed its work, with all four countries coming up with different conclusions. The United States wanted the borders to remain the same as in 1941, with which the United Kingdom agreed, with the difference that a small part of the Italian territory would belong to Yugoslavia. On the other hand, the Soviet Union proposed a course of the border west of Videm. He made a compromise French proposal. On both sides of the border, the same strong national minorities remained, with no distinction between the Slovenian and Croatian minorities. Italy received Venetian Slovenia, Gorizia and Canal Valley, and Yugoslavia was the territory east of the Morgan Line. With the signing of the Paris Peace Treaty, Yugoslavia acquired a territory of 7,000 square kilometers with almost 500,000 inhabitants. Since Gorica remained on the other side of the border in Italy, the same year brigadiers from all former Yugoslavia began to build a new town along the border, Nova Gorica. The then Prime Minister of the Government of the Republic of Slovenia, Miha Marinko, secured 1 billion dinars at the famous meeting on Ljak on September 21, 1947 for the construction of the city. At the same time, the Free Territory of Trieste was created. The Free Territory of Trieste was divided into two zones. The Budja and Koper districts entered Zone B, which was run by the Yugoslav Army, and Trieste and its surroundings became part of Zone A under the administration of British newspapers. The official languages of the WTO were Slovene and Italian, while Zone B was Croatian. The WTO never really acted as a single state, nevertheless it was issuing its money and postage stamps and was represented in the United Nations in New York. He was constantly involved in the choice of an international governor, which has been difficult to negotiate with great powers. After the founding of the Free Triassic Territory, the United States and Great Britain pressed heavily on Yugoslavia and supported Italian territorial aspirations. On March 20, 1948, the governments of the United States, Great Britain, and France, without the consent of Yugoslavia, issued a tripartite, London, declaration to join the entire Free Triassic Territory to Italy. Hurting again with guns. After the dispute between Yugoslavia and the Inform Bureau and, above all, the Soviet Union in the summer of 1948, the West's pressure on Yugoslavia began to decline, and the United States proposed that Trieste be resolved through dialogue between Italy and Yugoslavia. The latter became particularly interesting for the USA, since the Yugoslav conflict with the countries of the Socialist Bloc corresponded with it. The Free Triassic Territory has become an ever-increasing financial burden for the United Nations and allies, the United States being the main financial supporter of the United Nations, so they decided to begin the gradual withdrawal in 1953. Italy reacted to the withdrawal of Western allies by sending troops to the border with Yugoslavia. Tito replied by mobilizing units with all the countries he sent along with hundreds of tanks to Italy, which would almost certainly lead to a military confrontation. London Agreement and Slovenian official exit to the sea. With US mediation, the military units of both countries finally withdrew from the vicinity of the WTO. In 1954 an agreement was reached that Zone B and a part of Zone A would join Yugoslavia, and most of Zone A, led by Trieste, would belong to Italy's Memorandum of Understanding of October 1954, T.I. The London Agreement or the London Memorandum, the WTO also actually ceased to exist. The treaty provided minority rights on both sides of the border. Finally, The border between the two countries was confirmed in 1975 by the Ozimo Agreements. With the abolition of the Free Territory of Trieste, the People's Republic of Slovenia officially got an exit to the sea, and in the same year the Anchor Monument was erected on the Square of the Revolution, today's Congress Square. The monument reports that Slovenians are an able nation and reminds of the connection of the region of Primorska to the motherland,